Hey guys, what's up? So today I'm gonna do sort of a in-depth video on Traptrix. So with the deck on the horizon in January, I think it's kind of a neat deck to play, kind of a casual, fun deck. And it's definitely an older archetype and one of my favorites. I played it during the hat format, which was basically, I think it was hands, artifacts, trap tricks, kind of a mesh of good card stun deck. And yeah, now, you know, trap tricks has always kind of gotten bits and easy bits of support throughout the years, and it never really pushed them to, be competitively viable or even like good. They still needed some sort of other engine to kind of work with the deck, so you can put in, you can still play artifacts in the deck. You can play, or you use Traptrix as a small engine in some other archetype, or you put in something like Dogmanica or whatever. But yeah, in the end, Traptrix definitely more of a casual deck, especially considering the pace of Yu-Gi-Oh, where traps are not very viable and they're very slow, and they can be very bricky. Long gone are the days where you summon a monster, set one or two trap cards, and then pass turn. Those exchanges are long gone, and so basically the deck has kind of disappeared, and is relegated to being too slow. And the fact that the deck really does kind of need to go first in order for it to do anything. Going second is still a very big weakness of the deck, but with the new support, it gives it some life. I wouldn't say it makes it top tier or anything. I would definitely say it makes it playable, especially if you just kind of want to go pure trap tricks that you don't want to mix in any other secondary archetype. Then the new structure deck is definitely gonna make the deck playable. And you can definitely take this deck to like a locals and play and do relatively well. And in the end, or I guess overall, the deck is also very cheap to make. There are a few cards that you could play and make the deck even more optimal and more consistent, but they do cost a lot more money. But in my opinion, and this the way I built this particular deck, I want to say it's pretty budget friendly. In terms of real dollars, you're looking at about maybe $100 for the deck. If you're not doing any sort of max rarity or you're going lowest print possible and everything, you could probably build this deck for about $100, give or take. So I think it's definitely accessible deck. Deck that can be also very easy to pilot, easy to use. It's not very complex to understand. Most of the cards are pretty self-explanatory, and same thing with the combos and stuff like that. So not like a difficult deck. Like if you were playing like Black Wings and you're back in 2010 versus Black Wings today, where it's a combo deck and it's very hard deck to pilot, or even like something like Necros where it gets very confusing to play. I think Traptrix is one of those decks that's just super linear, super easy to play, solid strategy, pretty consistent in what it does, what it wants to do. I would say the main weakness of the deck is probably perhaps bricking, because you are playing a lot of traps, so it's a little slow. Deck's a little slow, so it's prone to like bricking. It doesn't push out very super strong monsters, like the boss monsters and stuff in the deck aren't that strong. Most of the boss monsters are the main ace monsters of the deck. They're more controlling aspect, like they hurt your opponent, but they can't really close out the game. So like the main weakness of Traptrix has been kind of closing out the game. So the longer you play Traptrix in the during a duel or match, the longer the game goes, the worse the deck gets, because your top decks aren't going to be as good as someone else's top decks. Like let's say for example you top deck one of your trap holes, you're just gonna lose, because the card is not gonna win you the game. there's not many cards in the deck itself that's going to win you the game. So you need a combination of cards. You need to be able to establish your board and control the game, and eventually push out damage as quickly as possible. So if you try to play the grind game with Traptrix, while the deck can play a grind game, it's not typically very good at it, because it's eventually going to lose, and you're eventually going to draw bad cards or break whichever, and that's when the deck kind of crumbles. But overall, yeah, the starters and the starting cards in the deck are pretty strong. At least all the monsters are. Like almost every monster that you can summon on your first turn, at least normal summon, is typically pretty good in the deck, especially with the new structure deck stuff that's coming out. And as you can kind of see, they're all labeled OCG right now because we don't really have an official list of cards yet in TCG. Because in the OCG, the structure deck did come with a couple of cards that were banned in the TCG, which is, for example, like Max C. It comes with Max C in the OCG, but obviously we don't have Max C here in the TCG. And so no real deck list has been confirmed yet, I believe, or at least as the making of this video to my knowledge. But yeah, anyways, the cards are basically out, and they've been translated, and you can kind of read what they do. And I want to say, yeah, a majority of them are good cards that support the deck pretty well. And as I mentioned, like the deck is very budget friendly. You can build a deck with just buying 3 structure decks and a couple of maybe spend like maybe $70-$80 on your extra deck, and you'll have a pretty decent deck to play in to play with in at a tournament. Okay, so that's kind of like the basis of the idea behind the deck, and some history, and some something you should kind of know before building the deck and playing with it. All right, so the build, there hasn't really been any like top builds in the OCG that you can, that at least when I looked it up, I couldn't really find anything that's like definitive. There's a lot of just builds with a lot of kind of random stuff or random ratios, mesh of archetypes. Kshatriya, for example, has been a pretty interesting mesh to be thrown in with this particular deck. So Kshatriyas, in the structure deck, they threw in some Mech Knights, which makes sense because you can link summon and set a trap, and you can easily summon out your Mech Knight, like Mech Knight purple, Mech Knight blue. So you can do that even if you wanted to, or you can like throw in artifacts, because I think they in the structure decks they do have some artifacts like Sanctum and Scythe and stuff like that. So that's another option there. But in general, I think this deck wants to be played as primarily a pure Traptrix, so you don't really need any other archetypes to be really mixed in to make this deck work. So I think, at least in this particular build, I'm gonna try to stick with just Traptrix. Now Kshatriya, I think, definitely would make this deck a lot stronger, more powerful, but I mean, Fenrir's is like $60-$70 at the moment, so if you're more on the budget, I don't recommend trying to go the Kshatriya deck style. But yeah, I think in general, there's only like a couple cards in here that you may have to just buy that isn't included in the structure deck. They might replace something like Maxi. They might maybe replace Maxi with like an Ash Blossom or Impermanence or something like that. Who knows, you know? The Konami's been pretty decent on the reprinting of like some meta cards. I don't think they'll add like a Droplet or anything in the deck. Then again, you don't really need Droplet in this deck. You could play Droplet, but I don't think you really need Droplet. I think Impermanence is better for the deck, just because, you know, it synergizes with what you're trying to do. Okay, so let's jump into the deck. I'm gonna explain the deck, at least my deck here. Now, definitely this deck, it definitely could use a lot more tweaking and a lot more playtesting. I haven't really got to playtest the deck. I just been kind of watching some videos, looking at some deck lists online, and kind of just compiling some cards that might be good. playable in the deck, some other strategies, stuff like that. So this video is basically just gonna give you the general idea of the deck, and cards that you might want to use, and then yeah, once the deck finally comes out, we'll be able to get more data and more testing and be able to see what works in the deck and what doesn't work in the deck. But right now it's just kind of like we're in an experimental phase and we're just kind of trying a bunch of stuff, throwing darts at the board, see what sticks, and yeah, go from there. Now, I haven't played Traptrix in years. The last time I did play it was, like I said, hat format, which was, you know, the only cards that were playable was Diania, and then Mamelo, and I guess the Nightmare Hole here, and Bottomless. And that was the only cards that were really used back then. So with all the new Traptrix stuff, I don't know every single combo or every single line of play that people who've been playing the deck for years do. So do forgive me if I miss something or don't explain it correctly. But I get the general idea. Like I own most of these cards in real life. I just haven't gotten around to putting a deck together because I didn't think it would be worth my time. But with the structure deck coming out and new support, I think it's finally time to pick up the deck and give it a shot. And so yeah, this is just my interpretation of the deck, and obviously it's going to change. All right, so now that I've kind of set the premise, let's talk about the deck. So the first card here is a card that is from another archetype that also deals with trap cards. It's the Labyrinth stuff. And so the Labyrinth cards can work with Traptrix, but I find that the majority of them aren't really worth adding to the deck because they're kind of clunky and they're kind of you need to dedicate Labyrinth to its own deck. And the only Labyrinth card I think that's worth perhaps trying out would be this card right here. So this is Lady of the Labyrinth, or I guess Lady of the Silver Castle in the TCG. But basically, she came out in the most recent pack, and she's not too bad of a price if you wanted to pick one up, about $10 or so. But anyways, what this card is essentially, it's kind of like your boss monster of the deck. Now, Traptrix, their main issue is not having a definitive boss monster. That's what this deck is kind of weak to. Most of the monsters you summon out are pretty weak. They're like 1600, maybe 1800 at the biggest attack points. You really rely on your extra deck as a Traptrix player to get like decent interaction, decent quote-unquote boss monster. But even though you get out like good monsters, they can't close out the games. Like, for example, Sarah and Rafflesia, those were like the main go-to monsters that you would use to bring out, or use your normal monsters to bring out, and they're really weak. They're like 300 attack points and 800. That's not gonna beat over anything. That's not gonna be able to close out the game. They're very good monsters, but their stats are so bad that you're gonna be able to get rid of like your opponent's monsters using the trap hole cards, but you just can't win the game. Like, there's no way you're gonna be able to poke them out with cards like this. So the deck really lacks power, and there still hasn't been a good Traptrix boss monster yet that's been released. So there are two monsters you can add in that are kind of fulfills the same role, kind of. Lady of Labyrinth here, and obviously this card down here, Lord of the Heavenly Prison. So they have pretty good stats, and you can summon them for essentially free in a deck because you play a bunch of traps. You're always going to meet their condition to summon out. So I choose to play either one. I decided to play Lady of Labyrinth because I think she's pretty good just in general, and she nets you some advantage, kind of like Lord Heavenly. She doesn't protect her back row, but what she does is that she makes herself very hard to get rid of. The only real easy way to get rid of her is with like a kaiju or super poly, but otherwise, other than that, like, she's just very hard to get rid of. She's essentially a Dragoon. If you look at her first effect, as long as you control a set card, she can't be targeted by card effects, and she cannot be destroyed by card effects, or at least your opponent's card effects. So she just sits there. She's 3029, good stats. You summon her for free, and when you activate a trap, you set other traps. So like, it helps you to kind of replenish your resources a little bit and gives you a body that's hard to remove, and you can potentially beat over stuff. So pretty good in that sense, and she's super like generic to use for this deck. You don't require any other labyrinth card or anything else. You can just play her, and she's good. So I think she's good at either one copy or two copies. I wouldn't want to play more than that. Um, and that's why I chose her, just because she's a decent boss monster on her own. Where uh, I think if you're just gonna go generic, if you want to main deck this, you can main deck two of these guys instead, and he'll protect your back row and kind of net you some advantage. And I guess the good thing about this is he's searchable by using Garnet Knight, which searches out for a rock type, whereas she is not searchable. You kind of have to just draw into her, and that's really it. So that's the con of Labyrinth here. But overall, I think she's pretty cool. And this is overall just kind of a fun budget deck anyway, so we're not going to be playing the most optimal cards possible or the most optimal builds, but it's still like fun to play with. Next off, Triple Ash Blossom, still one of the best hand traps in the game. Almost no reason not to play it. It being a tuner doesn't matter because we have no synchros in this deck, so that doesn't really matter too much. But still a good, just good good card overall. So, but triple that. Triple Mamelio, it's the mainstay of the deck. It's always been kind of the face of Traptrix. You always want to use her effect if possible, and she's just got a lot better because now you can technically search out a monster. So the monster I'm talking about is basically in the form of a trap card. So this card right here. So you can summon her, search out Hotelia. I think that's how you pronounce it. Hotea. Anyways, you search it out, you set it, you activate it, discard a trap card, and you summon another body. So Mamelio is definitely a 3 of. It's one of your best starters that you can open up with. And so yeah, just 3 of her. I don't think you can play the deck with less than 3. The other thing is her second ability. It's very, very important. Her second ability pops a trap card when she's special summoned. That's not so much the point of her. Like, you don't really care if your opponent has trap cards or not. The point is her second effect is mandatory, meaning that no matter what, her effect is always going to activate. So even if there's no target on the board, even your opponent, if you went first and your opponent has nothing on the board, doesn't matter, her second ability will always activate, which is actually very important. And that is for Sarah. So Sarah needs a Traptrix monster to activate an effect for her to be able to basically get a free trap from your deck and place it down in the zone. So the reason why that's important, that this is a mandatory effect, is that let's say you bring her out with Sarah, then you activate her effect, then you can trigger Sarah again, and then set a trap card. Because some of the Traptrix cards here require like this one right here, like even the new one requires a monster before it's able to actually activate its effect. If you have no legal targets, you can't use it. Where Mamelio doesn't care if there's a legal target on the board or not. You can just activate it and proc Sarah just to get her ability. So that's kind of important there. So keep that in mind when you do play with Mamelio, is that the second effect is mandatory, so there's no way to stop it. So if there's something on your opponent's board that you don't want to pop, just be careful, because when you summon her, it's going to activate and you're going to pop whatever that is. And this was only really relevant back when Artifacts was played a lot. If you special summon Mamelio off of like Dianea, for example, and you pop like a Sanctum or something, it's game over. You're done for, right? Nowadays, the back row and stuff isn't that dangerous to pop. You can pop whatever, and it probably won't matter. You're most likely going to be blowing up a field spell, blowing up some sort of continuous spell, which is fine. It won't hurt you, but do keep in mind that her second effect is mandatory, and yeah, it just activates. So, and your opponent can also still respond to her effect, but her effect will be on Chain Link 1, so keep that in mind. Alright, so your second best, if maybe arguably your best normal summon would be this card, Mantis here. I definitely really like this card. It's almost like a one card combo in some sense. But yeah, really good card to be able to normal summon. So what she does is when you normal summon her, you search for basically another Traptrix monster. And the one that you want to search for nowadays is this one right here. Champa. I don't really know how to pronounce her name, I'll be honest. I'm just gonna call her Champa, just because that's her part of her last name, I guess. Arachno Champa. Anyways, you want to search for Champa, namely because Champa can special summon herself as an extender. And what that does for you here is like very simple line of play is you play Mantis, you search for Champa, you link away Mantis for Sarah, and then you activate Champa, you summon Champa, you trigger Sarah, and you get the and you go from there basically. But do be aware that if you summon out Champa with her own effect, you are locked into plants and plants and insects from your extra deck. So just keep that in mind if you do use her effect. You know, it's gonna lock you into that. But other than that, she's good extender. Good, just kind of like your first, you know, starting combo, I guess. And you can easily, you know, get out a couple of rank 4s and stuff like that. So yeah, pretty cool interaction there. Her secondary effect, not super useful. It's you target a spell trap card you control, bounce it back to your hand, and set another one. What this is good for is saving your cards, I guess. If someone's gonna MST you, or they're gonna Cosmic Cyclone or Harpy's Feather Duster, you can bounce a trap card back, save it from destruction. The setting is optional, I believe. You don't have to actually set it. Since it says then you can set one trap card, so you don't have to actually set. You can just bounce something back and then not use it anymore. So that's pretty good there. What is mainly used for is for example, if you had Dianea and you got like a trap hole back with Dianea and you decide not to use that trap hole and it's gonna get banished at the end phase, you can just bounce that trap card back and then just soft reset it, so that way the trap card doesn't banish itself at the end of the phase or whatever. So that's kind of a cool effect, but not really that useful. You could maybe use this with a continuous card. I haven't really figured out any good continuous spell. You can use it with maybe like a Phoenix Chain. You can like bounce back if you were playing a Phoenix Chain, for example. You can activate Phoenix Chain, target something, and then bounce back to Phoenix Chain, or like something like a Call of the Haunted or something like that, for example. That could be a use case for its second effect, but I don't think it's very important. So I'm not going to build or add cards just because Mantis can do that. So if you do, you know, you can. I just don't think it's worth adding cards just to abuse Mantis's second effect, especially nowadays in Yu-Gi-Oh. Maybe back in like 2015, it'd be like a very good value sort of thing, kind of like how Satella Knights would summon out Trevor. Trevor would bounce back all the Phoenix Chain, all the Call of the Haunted, and then you can reuse it again. Nowadays, I think that's just too slow, so you probably won't use her second effect all that much. But do keep in mind that she does have an interesting second effect. All right, so I kind of alluded to what Champa does. So Champa special summons herself, and she protects your back row once a turn from destruction. So that's kind of nice. So she'll protect your back row from Harpy's Feather Duster, MST, Lightning Storm. However, obviously, it won't protect it from like a Cosmic Cyclone. It won't protect it from Evenly Match. Speaking, by the way, Evenly Match is probably your worst nightmare to go up against. If someone evenlies you, you're basically just gonna scoop it up and go home. So do be careful about Evenly Match. But yeah, her first ability is where it's best used for. Now, I realize her first effect is a quick effect. I personally don't know when the hell you're gonna use it. Honestly, now my only time I can see the use case of her using her first effect as a quick effect is if you have Sarah and it's like your opponent's turn, you can activate her effects and then trigger Sarah. I guess you can do something like that, but you get a free trap, but that doesn't really accomplish much. Um, I guess you can activate it, summon it, and get her another body on board, but there's really not much. There's really no reason for you to really use her effect on your opponent's turn. Um, so you're mostly gonna be using during your turn. I usually don't even chain her on top. If I'm like doing like these link summons and stuff, I usually don't even bother with it. It's probably more useful to play. Her first effect is probably more useful if you're in the OCG where you're playing against like Max C. Like they Max C you, you can chain her effect on top of it, get her out before Max C resolves, so they don't draw a card. I can see sort of the use case for that maybe, or maybe you want to chain block or something, something like that. Like some tricky plays, some cute plays you can maybe do with her quick effect, but 90% of the time I want to say you just gotta use it like to summon on your turn, and then just link or exceed with it. So it being a quick effect doesn't really matter too much, but I guess it's kind of nice that it is a quick effect. But yeah, do remember it will lock you into insect and plant types, so don't use her as a random extender to try to go into something like a Axis Code Talker, and then try to OTK your opponent, but and forget that she actually won't allow you to do that. So yeah, she's definitely more of like, you use her maybe after you're done setting up your board, or you use her and you're gonna go into like a Rafflesia or maybe another Sarah or something like that. But yeah, other than that, just be careful if you're gonna activate her first effect. Okay, cool. Now this is another new card. It's called Pudica. I don't know how they're getting these names from. They sound Italian or something. I mean, I guess that, or there's some sort of plant or insect that I don't know. Maybe mantis. Oh, I guess it kind of makes sense. Like mantis, an insect, and this is a plant of some kind. I don't know. I'm not about but I don't specialize in plants, so I have no idea what I'm talking about here. Anyways, okay, so this card is pretty cool. Its first effect is just basically searches for a field spell, which means there's only one field spell we have, and it's this thing right here, Traptrix Orchard. So that's the reason why you play her. And her second effect is pretty good. So she's actually not bad as a starter. If you have another Traptrix in your hand, you could summon her, grab Orchard, play the Orchard, and then normal summon another Traptrix. So that's her primary use case. So you're able to get at least 2 bodies on board with just her alone. And then her second effect is pretty cool. When she special summon, you banish a monster on your opponent's board and they come back, and they special summon it during the next standby phase. Now that does a couple of things. So she's kind of like a Farfa, but not really. So Farfa and like Sideframe Omega, like they banish something and they return to the board. Okay, that's fine, whatever. This card is a little different. So this card will banish that said monster, and then your opponent can summon any monster they want. One of their banished monsters is what it says. So it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. I wish, honestly, it just allow you to for them to summon the same card that they banish, but allowing them to choose what monster they summon can be detrimental. Just be careful if you do use her effect. But the cool thing is, it requires them to special summon it, so that means you have a chance to actually remove that monster with like a trap hole. So like if they, for example, let's say I summon her, special summon her, and I target a blue eyes white dragon. I banish my opponent's blue eyes white dragon. Next turn, next standby phase, we resolve Boudica's effect. They choose to special summon blue eyes white dragon. Now I can Balmus trap hold that. So I guess that's one way of removal of like a big monster or something. But if it's a monster with like an effect when it's summoned, then that might be um, detrimental to you. So just be careful about using her effect and what your opponent has banished in their banished zone. So you don't want to allow them to like special summon a monster with a really good effect, and then that's gonna kill you. That's why we have a myriad of trap holes to kind of hopefully prevent that. But either way, that's kind of the cool and bad thing about her secondary effect. The problem with Traptrix is they have a hard time dealing with established boards. It's also a very another big weakness of the deck itself. Yeah, there's just no way for you to deal with like a blue eyes. Even an example, blue eyes white dragon, right? There's none of the monsters you have will be able to run over a blue eyes white dragon. And none of your traps would answer it either. Like none of your traps would be able to answer a blue eyes white dragon that's already established on the board. That's the main weakness of trap holes is if something's already out on the board, you just can't deal with it. So she's just a way to kind of work around that. So you kind of work around that cause, and then you kind of hopefully be able to deal with it with your your trap cards that are just kind of sitting there. Maybe they're dead, maybe they're not, but that's just one way for Traptrix to kind of like another toolbox card to kind of help them deal with stuff that's already on the board. But yeah, that's kind of like the main weakness of Traptrix too, is that if your opponent brings a boss monster out on the board, you have a very hard time dealing with it. Best way to deal with it is to prevent it. So that's the ideology or the idea behind Traptrix, is just to prevent your opponent from doing stuff. But if they already established their board, this deck has a hard time breaking boards. All right. Next off, we're gonna talk about Dianea, just another old card. But Dianea is pretty good. She's essentially a Blackwing Blizzard. When she summons, you summon another Traptrix defense mode, and you proc off an effect. And her secondary effect, back then it wasn't that good. Her secondary effect was hard to use. When you special summon her, she gets a trap hole back and you set it. But nowadays it's a lot easier to use. You can definitely get some value out of her second effect, and it's actually pretty good and pretty useful. You either for her ratio, she's not as good as the other ones so far. So you either play 1 or 2. You would never play 3 because you'll definitely brick if you play 3. So I'm playing 2 here, namely because I'm also playing Traptrix Allure, and Traptrix Allure allows you to kind of set up some stuff with her, so it allows her to be good on turn 1. Where like if you're not playing like Traptrix Allure, then she's just not that good. I would definitely play like just 1 copy of her if you're not playing the Traptrix Allure here. But other than that, she's just a solid card. It helps you kind of like your comeback mechanic. So as long as the game drags out, you top deck her or you have her in your hand, you play her, she gets some value back, allows you to go to a synchro play, 1 card synchro play, sorry, 1 card exceed play. Yeah, just overall good card, but can be dead in the early games. You just have to be able to set her up, and her secondary effects actually pretty useful nowadays. Alright, next off we're going to talk about Vesculo here. Vesculo is not that great of a card, honestly. It's kind of whatever's. The reason we play her is because she's just another extender that we can use. We can search it out with Mantis and then use it with Mantis, and then send a card and summon her, and stuff like that. Or we summon her for free off of Sarah, and then she's like a thing when she's in the graveyard. She does something in the graveyard. She sets another trap card if you have no back row. So she kind of does stuff, but she's not good enough to play 2 of, and she's definitely don't want to see her. She's one of those cards that stays in the main deck until you need her. So yeah, kind of like a card that you might be able to even cut if you wanted to. On top of that, let's take a quick kind of a detour and talk about some of the other Traptrix while we're at it. Okay, so another card that we're not playing is Atrax here, or Atrax, I think. It's a good effect, but it's a card that you just don't want to see because it doesn't do anything other than making your trap holes playable from your hand, which is not that great anyways, and your trap cards can't be negated. I mean, I guess you can do some cute stuff with like Royal Decree and Traptrix and but whatnot, but that's kind of like not that good. So she's a good beater, and that's all. That's all it really is. If she was able to special summon herself, something like that, she'd be a lot more better and more playable. But unfortunately, I don't think she's worth running in Traptrix right now. This card right here, Glenlicia, Genlicia, Genlisi. I don't know. Anyways, this card could be played. You could play one copy. I think it's not terrible. It's just like one of those, just like Traptrix. It's just one of those cards that if you open up with it, it just doesn't do anything. This card is definitely like a card like Diania, where like later in the game it's good, and there's potentials for you to abuse her. But like opening up with her or just normal summoning her, she just doesn't do anything. If she had an effect in the graveyard, she'd be better. But yeah, other than that, she just doesn't do anything. So unfortunately, we're not playing her either. She didn't quite make the cut in the deck. Now, okay, so another card is Nephinthus. So this card is not bad per se, but it's slow. Like you don't want to summon her in attack mode, and you know, like I guess you technically could. You could just summon her. Wait, let me see. Let me read this quick. Yeah. So she'd be better if she didn't require for you to activate a trap hole card. Like if she was like Sarah, where you activate, I think, you know, a trap card, like a normal trap card, then she'd be so much better. But the fact that she requires you to activate an actual trap hole card makes her like literally unplayable. There's only one card in the entire deck, which is the new trap hole card, that will be able to proc her on turn 1, and so she's just not that good. Like if you summon her off of Sarah, then I guess she's, you know, decent. So maybe you can play one and do something, but I wouldn't want to open up with her either. That's why we're not really playing with her, because we're trying to minimize our breaks in our hand, because like, you know, we're playing a lot of traps, and there's a lot of Traptrix that do nothing on turn 1 if you just open up poorly. So we're trying to minimize that, and by cutting those out. I mean, they're definitely playable. All the Traptrix are definitely playable. You know, with the exception of this one, I want to say, because this one seems kind of weird. Like there's no benefit for you activating a trap hole card from your hand rather than, I guess, the board here. I guess it's like the only benefit is that if you search a trap hole card, they can't MST or whatever, and you can just use it even on your turn, I guess. Which that's probably rare. Like, but anyways, yeah, all of them have like certain use cases, but I just don't think they would be good enough to add into the deck, and the potential for them to clog up your opening hand and be just not that great of cards. You know, just not worth the trade-off, I guess. So yeah, so those are the cards that we aren't playing, and those are the reasons we're not playing them. All right. On to the next card. This is a new card. It's basically a trade-in for Traptrix / normal trap cards. So I want to say this card is not bad, but it's not that great either. It's like in the middle, but you know, it comes with a deck, and if you don't want to spend like $40 on Pot of Prosperity or Dichotomy or whatever, then this card is not too bad to play. It's kind of neat in the sense that it makes like Diania pretty good. The reason, sorry, the other reason I like it is because it kind of gets rid of your dead cards. Like for example, if you had like double Pudica, you know, in your opening hands, you know, that's not going to be too good, so you can just dump one of them and draw 2 fresh cards. Obviously, its main weakness is it's weak to Ash Blossom, because your discarding is a cost, and it's also kind of weak in the sense that it's once per turn, a hard once per turn. I don't think this card needed to be a hard once per turn. I mean, it's Traptrix, right? I mean, there's really no way to really abuse just dumping a bunch of traps to your graveyard as much. But unfortunately, it's a hard once per turn, so I would say maybe you can even just play 2 copies instead of 3. I just wanted to play 3 just maybe to open it up with, 1 or something like that. Its secondary effect is not that useful either. Haven't seen a use case for it either. I guess sometimes you can banish a Traptrix or a trap card and you might be able to put it to the bottom of your deck. It's like, alright, that doesn't really help you too much. If it added to your hand, I think it would have been a lot better. Like add the banish trap card to your hand. Like I think that's what they should have done. Like Traptrix is not going to be a deck that's going to break a format, even though it has like that, it would have the secondary effect would be pretty plusy, I feel like the deck just needs that anyways, but putting it to the bottom of your deck is like, alright, cool. But I mean, in general, I just like the card just because it works with Dianea. It allows you to play 2 copy of Dianea without, I guess, bricking. Or if you went first and you drew like a impermanence or something like that, impermanence is not going to help you out, so you can just dump impermanence with Allure here and draw 2 fresh cards, and hopefully those 2 fresh cards are better. So that's just kind of a way to unbrick yourself. Like I said, you can play Pot of Prosperity or something instead. Those are definitely viable options here. Next off, Orchard. It's your new field spell. As I mentioned, it allows you to normal summon additionally. That's the main effect. That's the major card, a part of the card that you want to use the most. It also protects your monster from, I think, battle for 1 turn. And then I think it also, you can banish something to special summon a Traptrix monster from your hand or grave. Not super duper useful, but I guess if it sticks around on the board long enough, you might get some value out of it. Honestly, it's not that great of a field spell. Not as broken as something like a tier element field spell or something like that. So I don't think I would want to see this in my opening hand at all. It's just one of those cards that, okay, if I have a Boudica and I search it out, it's cool. If not, whatever, it's not a huge deal. I'd rather not see this card at all. So you have 3 ways of searching it out, and hopefully, you either draw this card, or you either search it out and see it with Boudica, or you just hopefully never draw it. So that's the main idea behind that. Alright. For traps, the main kind of gut of the deck here, I think Brigandine is still really good in the deck, especially with like some of the stuff you can do nowadays. You can easily pump a lot of bodies on board, and Brigandine plus any Traptrix in the deck or in your opening hand is like a good combo, because you summon the Traptrix, activate the effect, and then link away for Sarah, play the Brigandine, activate Brigandine, activate Sarah again, and so on and so forth. So I think it's still a very good card to play. It's kind of mandatory in the deck. You definitely don't need like parallel exceeds or anything like that anymore. So you have like a couple extenders. You have Champa here, you have Brigandine extender, you have Hotia. So you have like those 3 as your extenders, and that's good enough, I think. So I think Brigandine is good. And the fact that Brigandine doesn't require you to discard a card, so discarding with this is kind of like a mixed result sometimes. But yeah, Brigandine is just like, if you open up with it, easy combo extender, easy, body, easy to go into, Time Thief Redoer or something like that. So yeah. 3 permanents, just another good hand trap, and it works well with the deck, works well with Sarah. And then you can also like, fetch this off with Labyrinth and stuff like that. So I also like that for that reason, is you can use Labyrinth to fetch any of your normal trap cards, and you have a bunch of different names, so that's always kind of good there. But yeah, Labyrinth, Impermanence still solid hand trap, and still a solid trap card for the deck. Next off, we have Lost Wind. So Lost Wind is interesting. It's not that great of a card. I think it's still a good card, but not super great. What's good about it is that you can use it with Traptrix Allure and technically still get it back when your opponent summons something. And it also helps you deal with like really big monsters, because like I mentioned, this deck has a horrible weakness of not being able to run over anything that's like 2000 above. Like, it's just very hard for this deck to do so, and you really need to rely on your extra deck to do so. So Lost Wind is just another way to I guess get free pluses off of Allure, be able to negate a card effect, be able to make it a little bit smaller so you can also attack over it if you need to. But yeah, it's not too bad. And I think it's a permanent effect. Yeah, it's not even until the end of the turn. I think it's just a permanent halving of the attack and a permanent negate on the effect. So a decent. I'd say 2 is a good number. I don't think I would want to play 3. But yeah, it's up to you. You guys there. Alright, another card here just to kind of help deal with stuff on the board is Ice Dragon Prison. I don't know if I want to play the 1 or 2 copies or maybe even 3. Right now I have it at 1, just cause. So kind of a flexible spot right now. But yeah, just a 1 of right now. And then okay, so this like Burgundy is actually your second best extender here. I guess third best extender. Your best extender is Burgundy. Your second best is probably the Champa here. Then I would rate this one like on the third basis. So you're only playing 2 because she's or I guess this card is super searchable. You have 2 ways of searching it. You have Mamelio to search it, and you also have Sierra to search it. So Sierra will set it to the board, and you can immediately activate it by discarding a trap card, a normal trap card, or you can search it with Mamelio and add it to your hand. So either way, that's why you only play 2. It's a hard once per turn, so you definitely don't want to open up with too many of these, and you don't want to clog your hand with it. So you just 2. I would not recommend anything more than 2. So yeah, 2 there. Good card to start off your combos. Even if you don't see Burgundy or whatever, this card kind of substitutes for that. And then next off we have basically our 5 random trap hole cards. So in total we have 7 trap hole cards. I recommend between 6 to 7 trap hole cards is good enough for the deck. Play too much more in that, and I think you just brick yourself a bit. But we got basically one of kind of like everything here. So we got the new one here, the Delusion Trap Hole, which when your opponent special summons something with 2,000 attack or more, you can just blow up a monster and then banish a card in your opponent's graveyard. So it's kind of like a DD Crow and a really weird bombless trap hole, I guess. Or I guess not bombless trap hole, it's more like the Deep Dark Trap Hole card from yesteryears. But anyways, yeah, it's not bad. It's a little not as flexible as some of the other trap hole cards, but can still be pretty good. Then we have the original Traptrix Trap Hole card, which is Nightmare here. Not as good because it's kind of situational, but it's still worth it running. I want to say, just because you do get to negate the effect and destroy that particular card. So pretty good with Rafflesia, pretty good with setting it off for free or something like that. But other than that, I wouldn't really want to play more than one because it has the same issue as any other trap hole card. It just won't answer something that's already on the board. But yeah. And then we have Bombless Trap Hole, just kind of like generic here. It just hits anything that you want. 1500 attack and up, destroys and banish, which is pretty good. Then we have Gravedigger's Trap Hole. Just flexible trap hole, and you do get to burn someone for 2,000. But yeah, overall, just another solid trap hole card. And arguably our best trap hole is probably going to be the Floodgate one here. It's basically just a Book of Moon or I guess a Book of Tylo or whatever. Well, not Book of Tylo. That one flips it face up. I think it's Book of Eclipse. Yeah, Book of Eclipse. So basically, you flip all those monsters face down. The only reason this card wouldn't be as good is if what you're flipping down is too big for you to run over. Then this card is kind of okay. So you want to be flipping over like small stuff so that your Traptrix monsters can run them over. So just do be careful of that. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the extra deck. So the extra deck at the moment is kind of cookie cutter. There's not any definitive way to build the extra deck yet. I mean, you are just kind of like a rank 4 Exceed spam deck. So super flexible in what you may potentially want to run. Your exceeds are pretty cookie cutter. There's not really many other exceeds you would want to mix in. Um, and in general, I think you basically, the main rule of thumb when it comes to exceeds for Traptrix is that you want to basically run one copy of every Traptrix link extra deck monsters that you can find, with the exception of Sarah. Sarah is either a 2 or a 3 of card, but everything else can be a 1 of. Maybe Rafflesia you can play 2 of, but everything else is like at least a minimum of 1 copy, mainly because of this card right here, because it locks you into plant and insect types, so you want to be able to have like a diverse profile of cards that you can summon while being locked under Champa. Um, so just keep that in mind. That's why I run like basically 1 copy of everything. But let's go over the extra deck and talk about the reasoning behind each card, I guess. Um, Zeus here, pretty self-explanatory. Not much to really talk about him. You do get a bunch of materials out, and you can kind of easily make him. I don't know if you can easily make a 4 material. You might be able to with paying this card, because it can steal monster and make more material, so you can potentially get Zeus to like 4 material. But he's just a good out to a bunch of stuff. You can also play like something like, you know, Exaton, I guess technically, if you wanted to, but yeah, I think Zeus is a pretty good card. Next, you got the Utopic package here. The reason we play this is just to deal a lot of damage, to hopefully try to close out games. As I mentioned, the deck just doesn't really have any way to close out a game. If you can pump him to 5,000 and like just smack something, it's pretty good there. Yeah, another card you can probably play would be like the Utopic Double or Nothing package. That deals even more damage. You can deal up to like, you know, 8,000 damage in one like swing, so it's kind of crazy. Numbers are crazy, right? So that's an option. I just decided just to stick with these 2 for now and play the deck, and then figure out where I want to go from there. Time Thief Reviewer, definitely a really solid card to go into. You can easily get 2 traps under this guy. You can like get Holtia here and Burgundy, and then you can just make a Time Thief Reviewer with 2 traps and make him a Wing Blast, which is kind of cool. Doesn't happen that often, but majority of the time, you know, it's just kind of funny when you can do that. So, solid card in Traptrix deck. Dweller, no real need to explain Dweller here. If you saw the YCS matchup with Dweller, it basically can win the game on its own against certain decks, namely Tier Elements. You summon out this against Tier Elements, and you just, yeah, basically that's it, right? Not much to really talk about that. Babushka here, just another good card. Good way to stall your opponent, and you maybe slap a Zeus on top of it later or something like that. Just an annoying card for your opponent to deal with. Alright, so the new Traptrix Exceed here is this card. Ping Huya? I don't really know how to pronounce her name either. Main idea here is that she's basically like a Stratos, kind of like a Garnet Knight thing, Granite Knight. And then she also steals her opponent's stuff when it gets sent to the graveyard, which is kind of cool. Either graveyard or banish, so she kind of does both. So you can kind of maybe stop some tier element effects. So they, you know, send something to the graveyard. You can steal that one monster and attach it material before it can activate its effect, something like that. So, kind of a neat card there. Another card I can't pronounce. Alumrus. It's got Monster Reborn, and it steals your opponent's monsters too. So it's kind of handy in some sense. It's just versatile. Not probably something you want to summon out on your turn 1. Probably something you want to summon out on like turn 2, or, you know, later on in the game when you have your graveyard set up. But yeah, early turns you probably don't want to summon her. Um, the next best monster to summon would be Rafflesia here. Rafflesia basically turns. You can have her effect be any trap hole you want. Really good. Also provides a mini veil for your other monsters, so your other monsters cannot be destroyed by card effects or targeted for attack as long as she's on the board. I believe, and yeah, just kind of a nice way to protect your Sarah and protect your weaker monsters. The main issue with her is that she only has 300 attack points, so she cannot close out a game. She can only just defend you, mainly. So she's kind of like a Dante, I guess, in some sense. You can kind of just sit on this in defense mode and don't really need to do anything with it. But yeah, still a good card to have. Next off, Access Code Talker, just another way for you to close out the game, make a big number out of it, and then swing in for a lot, blow up the board, blah blah blah. Not much to talk about that. Azusa here is just a placeholder in my opinion. Because I'm not playing Kasatrias, I don't think she's as good. So if you're playing like the Kasatria Fenrir package, then I definitely think she's a mainable card. Namely because if you bring back your opponent's Fenrir from their graveyard, you can search for your own. So that's kind of the cool thing there. But outside of that, she's not as good in the TCG. In the OCG, she's better because everyone's playing Max C, so you can summon her still a Max C and link it away for an access code or something like that. But yeah, in the TCG, she's not as good. There's not many Earth monsters to steal, so she can be played or she can be dropped completely. But I'm just keeping her in there for now as a placeholder. All right. Next off, we have the new Link monster here. I think this one's pretty cool, and I think it's actually very usable. So what she does is she pumps all your other Traptrix monster by 1,000, which is cool as long as you have a normal trap card in your graveyard, which 90% of the time you will. And then I think. And then her secondary effect is kind of cool too. I think you should just negate a bunch of cards. If I'm reading it correctly, you negate like up to the number of plants and insects you control, and then you can also banish a normal trap card from your graveyard and blow up a card. So yeah, it's kind of cool. Namely, you want her there just to increase the attack point of all of your Traptrix. Like I mentioned, because they're all really weak, so you can at least pump up your normal stuff to like 2,600 here. 1,900, 2,500. So you make them relatively big, and you can kind of go for a game. In that sense, it's not gonna make like Rafflesia big enough to be a threat. She's gonna be like 1,300. It's not gonna be that good, unless you have like 2 of her on the board. Then I guess by all means, cool. Anyways, next card, Kurelia here, or Kularia. I don't know why I have so many Kulas here. Anyways, just another I think another monster reborn sort of, another good card to kind of climb into an access code, I guess. Because I think you let's see, blah 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 blah. Yeah, she's okay. Like, she's a little slow. If you can have her sit on the board for like a turn, then yeah, you can use her to climb into an access code. But yeah, other than that, like, just a good card to have on the board and sit on a little bit and kind of replace your trap hole cards, so you can get like different ones, or you, instead of sending it to the graveyard, you just reset it, which is kind of nice. So yeah. And then our namestay, our go-to card is going to be Sarah. Almost every Traptrix card is going to go into her and allow you to kind of combo off. So she is a must of in the deck. Either 2 to 3 copies. Yeah, not much to really say. 2 cool effects if you activate a trap hole card, or I guess a trap card in general. You special summon a Traptrix monster. If you use a Traptrix monster's effect that is not her own, you set a trap hole card directly from your deck. Namely, you activate a Traptrix monster effect, for example, and then you set this card here. You can immediately activate it and activate her second ability. So Kind of cool in that sense, but yeah. All right, let's talk about the extra deck, or sorry, the side deck, and then we'll move on to some optional cards, and then we'll maybe do some test hands or something like that. So this is definitely gonna be an in-depth review or in-depth video, so it's gonna be a little bit longer than my usual stuff here. So with the side deck, there's no real way to build it right now. I don't really know any good cards for the deck. It's kind of everywhere at the moment. Everything's kind of like in the testing phase, so yeah, it's subject to change, I guess. Cards that I think that are going to be a staple of the side deck for Traptrix would be something like Solemn Judgment, and like some stuff like back row removal like this. So I think like at least half of this is going to be a staple for the deck. There's like no way you're going to remove it. The other half is like, I guess, meta dependent. Depends on your meta, depends on what you're facing against, depends if you're going to like a YCS or going to regionals. You want to change up your side deck accordingly and sort of inspect into what kind of matchups you are expecting to face. But this is kind of generic and cookie cutter at the moment, and I'll kind of explain them card by card. So D-Shifter, I decided to not main deck D-Shifter. I decided to side deck it. You could definitely main deck D-Shifter if you want to. We're a deck that can play without our graveyards, but it's still not very optimal. The reason why I'm not playing D-Shifter is that I just didn't want to clog my opening hand with the card, and I like this card going second more than I like it going first. And so, yeah, I decided not to main deck this D-Shifter, even though tier elements is everywhere. But yeah, you can definitely main deck this card at the moment. I just decided to side it. Next off is the Heavenly Lord Prison guy here. Side decked him, namely because I don't think he's as good going first compared to like Labyrinth. Labyrinth, you can actually play her going first, and she's good, and she'll stick around on the board. Where like this guy can't protect himself. So, he has a 3K beater, but yeah, I think he's better off if you're gonna expect your opponent to play a bunch of Lightning Storms or Harpy's Feathers or something like that, or Twin Twister, for example. Then he's a lot better. Because main deck wise, not a lot of people are going to have a bunch of back row hate outside of Harpy's Feather Duster. And if you have Champa here, Champa will at least protect you from a Harpy's Feather Duster. Game 2 and 3 and onwards, definitely they're gonna side in all of their back row hate, and that's what makes him a little bit better. But yeah, going game 1, I don't think he's as good for sure. So I think he's just side deck worthy, not main deck worthy. All right, next off, Regeki. Like I mentioned, the deck has a terrible time dealing with stuff on the board. So your options is that you can play Regeki, or if you need to board break even harder, then you can play like Dark Rule No More, or maybe whatchamacallit, Droplet, stuff like that. I just put Regeki in, pretty generic. You just blow up stuff, and yeah. It also can help you OTK. This deck does have a potential to OTK just because you can spam a bunch of level 4s, and you have a bunch of extenders, so you can make quite a lot of monsters and go for access code pretty easily. So just another card to kind of help you with that. I guess it can also get rid of stuff like, you know, Danko Seka, for example, if your opponent was playing that. And yeah, it's just right now it's more or less, I want to say it's a placeholder, but yeah. And then you have your back row hate. I think it's just pretty staple here. Cyclone and Duster. And then finally, Solemn Judgment. I think Solemn Judgment is definitely great going first. So like if you lose game 1 or something like that, or your opponent makes you go first, like who in their right mind would do that? But just in case they do, or you decide to go first, I think Solemn is a good card to bring in going first. Solemn Strike is another option. Solemn Strike is better going first or second. It doesn't really matter. Like the card is just overall great going first or second, whereas Solemn Judgment is a lot better going first. What I like about Solemn Judgment over Strike is that you can always activate it. There's never a time you can't pay for it unless you're under threat of dying to something, like a cowboy or something like that. But other than that, yeah, Solemn Judgment you can always use. It will also protect you against Dengo Seka, for example, or it will protect you against Evenly Match. So that's why I like the Solemn Judgment. I don't like to main deck it because it's obviously Solemn Judgment is kind of terrible going second. And game one you don't know if you're going first or second. But yeah, so that's kind of like the idea behind the judgments and the side here. All right, so I'm going to speak about some other optional cards here. So some of these cards are cards that I'm currently... Sorry, let me add some additional cards here. Currently thinking about, but not actively playing. And just wanted to kind of make a list here so you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. And yeah, hopefully it'll make some sense here. So let's talk about some archetypes that you can mix this deck in with first, and then we'll kind of go from there. Alright, so first archetype is obviously Mech Knights. You know, you're a back row deck, and you can easily get Sarah onto the board and leave like a open slot so you can summon out Mech Knights, and they're good for the deck in the sense that they have stats. Like I mentioned, the deck is really weak because we don't really the Traptrix themselves don't really have any good stats. So by playing Mech Knights, you kind of give yourself the ability to beat over stuff. Issue with Night Mechs is that you don't really do anything else with them. I guess you can like link, and that's it. Even then, your link options are very limited because most of the Traptrix monsters require some sort of like plant or insect to be able to be summoned. And Mech Knights are obviously psychics. You can't really do that. Can't really do much with them, and you can't go into any of your Exceed 4s and stuff like that. So that's the downfall of Mech Knights here. But they're a good card for the deck just because you can go first or second with them, and they can provide that extra oomph where this deck is personally missing. But they don't do anything else in that. They just stat beat sticks. So that would be like the 3 types of Mech Knights you would generally play. But you probably play like 3 purple, 2 blue, and maybe 1 indigo. But yeah. Alright, next off you have the artifact package. Artifacts themselves are pretty good, especially going first. Going second, they're terrible. And especially if you draw them, you can just kind of break yourself. If you draw a Scythe or you draw a Morale Attack, there's nothing in the deck that will proc them on the board, because Mamelio targets your opponent's stuff, so Mamelio is not going to be able to proc your cards, and you have no other ways of blowing up your own back row. So you kind of look at the way the deck is built. There's no other monster you can use to blow up the back row with. You could maybe use like the Cyclone, I think Cyclonic Bird or some shit. Sorry, I forgot what Tornado Bird. Yeah, like you could maybe use this guy, I guess, if you link summon into this, or I guess one of the other Exceeds. You can blow up your own Morale Attack and stuff during your opponent's turn, or blow up your Scythe. But it doesn't seem worth it in my opinion to do that. So that's why we're not playing the artifact package. Another popular card was the hands, but unfortunately they are not good anymore. I don't. Is it Ice and Fire Hand? Sorry. Yeah, so these are the other cards that you could use. Ice and Fire Hand, that was pretty much the, I think, 2014 meta. I forgot exactly when Hat was popular. I think it was 2014. But yeah, they just don't do much anymore. You can normal summon this, and yeah, it doesn't really do anything, unfortunately. So yeah, don't play them anymore. All right, so Kshatriya, I spoke about that before, where you can play Fenrir in the deck. Main reason I don't play them because I don't own any, and they're like $70-$80 a piece, and I don't want to spend money on that. They have a high chance of being reprinted probably soonish in like a Megatin or something, and you can get them for probably $1 at that point. So I decided not to invest in any of the Fenrir stuff here. But yeah, you can definitely play 3 copies of this if you have them, and you can play a couple other field spells to go along with that. So you can play Prime Planet Para Aethos. This will allow you to search out Fenrir and keep going, and do some shenanigans. You can play Terraforming, Necro Valley as your searchable targets for stuff like that. So yeah, there's a couple of it's a small package. I want to say it's about a 6-card package. So you have like 3 Fenrirs, 1 and 1 and 1. So that's about a 6-card package you can throw in the deck. Fenrir is a little bit better than Mech Knights in the sense that it's decent stats. It does get rid of stuff when it attacks, and it searches for itself. So it's definitely better than Mech Knights. Problem with this card is it's just expensive. So that's my main con for the deck, or the main reason I'm not playing it. Just expense, I guess. But yeah, I'd probably recommend this card, and it allows you to play this and still play like Gozen Match if you wanted to. But yeah. Anyways, next off, Pot of Prosperity. In that hand, you can also play Pot of any of these, I guess. You can play Desires, or you can play Extravagance too. Desires pretty good, I wouldn't say, because a lot of the cards in the deck you don't really care if you banish it. There's not like a combo card in the deck. This deck is a kind of a combo deck, but it's not like you're playing Dragoon or you're playing Destiny Hero, what's his face, Destroyer, where you have 1 copy of a fusion card or something like that. If you banish it, you're kind of screwed. So definitely Desires can be played if you just want the draw power, and you're playing a lot of redundant stuff. So Desire is definitely a playable card in the deck if you wanted to. Prosperity is also a very decent card. You aren't gonna use all of your extra deck for sure, so you can banish 3 or 6 and increase the consistency of your deck in general. So not bad. Extravagance I probably wouldn't play just because it's just too risky. You need Sarah. If you banish all your Sarah, your deck basically just dies on its own. So not worth the risk. I'd rather play Desires over Extravagance for sure. Next off, Call by the Graves. Optional, good card. Broken card. I guess I couldn't see a purpose of using it in the deck. That my trap holes just wouldn't do. Yeah, it's good against Ash Blossom, but there's so many cards in your deck that if your opponent's gonna Ash something, they're gonna eventually Ash something anyways, and most of the time you don't really care. I guess you can just prevent Sarah from getting Ash, I guess. But there's a lot of cards in the deck just sets themselves from directly from the deck to the field, so it kind of works under Ash anyways. So I don't think you really care. And Veiler is Veiler, whatever. You don't really care either too much. The only card that this might protect is Traptrix Allure, or if you're playing Extravagance and stuff like that, it might protect that. But I don't think it's super necessary in the deck. All right, let's move on to some trap hole cards and talk about that. And yeah, so trap holes here, I laid out all the ones that were playable, and then let's talk about them really quickly. Trap holes just not that good. Targets and destroys. A lot of monsters nowadays. A lot of decks don't even normal summon anymore, so trap hole not too great there anymore. Void trap hole is pretty decent. It negates and destroys. It's just a little bit narrow and expensive to use in terms that it requires something that 2000 attack and higher. So sometimes it misses certain monsters that are very important to stop. But it can kind of get rid of some boss monsters, I guess. So it's a playable card. Just I don't think it's as good. I think time space is better. Time space is more flexible. Um, Granted, it had its days back then during like Stella Knight format and stuff like that. Definitely not as good anymore. But it's playable. Maybe one copy in the main deck or something like that. Deep Dark Trap Hole. This was better than during Cleave format. Because I think this card was kind of made for Cleave. So when they Pendulum Summon, you activate this and just banish all the damn Cleave. Nowadays it's just relegated to nothing because most monsters are like Link monsters or they're like Exceed monsters anyway. So this card doesn't even hit any of that. So not too great of a card anymore, unfortunately. Um, this one, it's good, but it's narrow because it only hits Link monsters, or it requires a Link monster to be summoned. So not every deck is gonna be Link summoning, and I guess you're better off playing Torrential Tribute, honestly, if you wanted to blow up the board. Torrential Tribute is just a lot better. Granted, this card is searchable and it's usable off of Raphlasia's effect. I don't think it's a good card and it's just gonna brick you, so don't do it. And then here we have uh, Network Trap Hole. Another decent card, but it's also very narrow because like the problem with this card is most of the time when your opponent's summoning from the main deck or the graveyard, it's a free summon anyways, and so you're losing one card to stop their free summon. You're minusing yourself one, and they haven't committed anything other than an effect. If this hit the extra deck also, then it'd be like the best trap hole. But the fact that it doesn't hit the extra deck makes it kind of bad. Because most of the trap holes you play, you want your opponent to commit some sort of resources. Like they commit like 2 monsters to single summon, they commit 2 monsters to Exceed summon or Link summon, and then you hit them with a trap hole, so you kind of get a 2-for-1. Where like Network Trap Hole, you're just minusing yourself. You know, maybe you can come out even if like they're playing a Lone Fire and you banish something off their Lone Fire or something like that. But other than that, it's just not too great of a card. Treacherous Trap Hole would be pretty good, except it's one of those cards that you play first. You have to search this thing first off of Mamelio or Sarah. Otherwise, this card becomes kind of dead. Obviously, because you're playing so many trap cards, you're gonna end up filling your graveyard with trap holes cards. So I don't like that. So I just bar not playing this at all. Oh, let me see here. There was one card I also want to talk about that was similar to. In terms of another card that's similar here is the Dogmatic Punishment. Dogmatic Punishment is similar to this because you can easily 2-for-1 your opponent. Only issue is that it requires extra deck space, so you need to play Entis, and then it also locks you out of your own extra deck. And I think with the way Traptrix is built nowadays, you definitely need to be able to access your extra deck the turn after for a decent follow-up play. If you can't do that and you get locked out, your deck's just gonna crumble. You don't have any power and stuff like that. So I don't think punishment is good. And the fact that the extra deck is pretty tight nowadays, I don't think you have the room to be able to throw in Entis and stuff like that for the punishment anymore. All right. Next off, we got Torrential Tribute. Pretty good. Unfortunately, not searchable, except if you're playing Lady Labyrinth. I guess you can search it off, but this will destroy your Lady Labyrinth. It does work under stuff like your Exceeds, since most of your Exceed monsters and your Link monsters like Rafflesia and stuff, they're unaffected by trap cards, so it's kind of cool in that sense. I just think it's okay. I'd rather keep the bodies on the board, and then push for game after. Use the bodies to like link into uh, access code and stuff like that to push for damage, rather than just wiping the board and sitting on a Rafflesia. Doesn't seem as good in my opinion. I think Compulse is better at that point, because Compulse you can activate whenever, and you still be able to protect your stuff. You be able to neg your opponent, or get rid of your opponent's monster and be able to push for damage. So I think Compulse is better than Torrential Tribute in this particular deck. Yeah. Next off, we have Dimensional Barrier. Dimensional Barrier may deserve a spot in the extra, in the side deck, but it kind of like falls under the same like thing as other trap holes. It just stops them from playing the game for one turn, potentially, and which could be really good in of itself. But I think it conflicts with stuff like Solemn Judgment and stuff like that. It's like if I had to choose what was a better card between like this and Solemn Judgment to put into my deck going first, game 2, I would probably put Solemn Judgment over Dimensional Barrier and pretty much any other trap. Like Judgment would probably go into my deck before any of these other traps would go into there. So that's why I decided not to play the Barrier, because I don't see myself playing anything else. If I were to lose the first game or something and I had to go first, like Judgment is always almost 90% of the time gonna go into the deck, and so it's hard for me to say like I'm gonna side in Dimensional Barrier on top of also playing Solemn Judgment. Maybe you can play 1 or 2 copies and sneak it in, but in my opinion, I think I'm just stick with the Judgment for now and go from there. Another interesting, like, I guess removal trap hole card is Terror of the Overroots. I guess it's similar to Delusion trap hole in that sense. So you're swapping a creature on the board for a creature in the graveyard sort of thing, and which can be good and bad, but I think it's a little worse off than Delusion trap hole, just because it's it requires your opponent to have a monster on the board and monster in the graveyard, and other than that, like, if they don't have that, then you can't really do anything with this. And on top of that, like Rafflesia and whatnot can abuse the trap holes better, where you can't really do anything with this card. You can't really bring it back. You can't really send it off with Rafflesia. So it's kind of a weird card. So I decided not to play it at all. Yeah. Breakthrough Skill, another interesting card here. It's basically like an impermanence, but slower. You can pitch it off of, Traptrix Allure, and then use its effect. Oh, I guess you can't, because you have to wait a turn to be able to use this effect. But I don't know. You're just better off with impermanence nowadays. So unfortunately, breakthrough skill doesn't make the cut anymore. A Floodgate that's pretty good in the deck, I would say, is be like Anti-Spell Fragrance. Anti-Spell is great in the sense that we are not really playing any spells, so we could actually afford to play this. It might be good going first, because you go first, you flip Anti-Spell, and you kind of lock your opponent out playing spells. So now they have to play with monsters only, and I guess if you're forcing them to set spells onto their battlefield before they can use them, you can then potentially pick off their spells with something like Mamelio, just summoning Mamelio out with Sarah or something. You can like blow up a spell card or something. So there's some synergy with the deck. I definitely think Anti-Spell is worth a look at. Now, if Pendulum Monsters were more popular, I definitely think it's side deck worthy. But as of now, it's kind of like so. I think I'd rather play like Judgment over Anti-Spell. At least Judgment can hit whatever I want it to hit, where Anti-Spell a little bit more narrow. And we have enough like protection, I guess. We have enough, like, we have the Lord of Heavenly Prison, and we have the Champa to kind of protect our back row. So I don't think Anti-Spell is really that great. It does hurt, if they're playing a lot of spells. If they're playing like field spells and they're playing like other spells, then yeah, you guess you can make a case for it. But I don't think I'm gonna look at it right now. Goizen, also not a good card. Mainly because sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. Mainly because your entire deck is just Earth types, so you're not really affected by this per se. The problem with the Goizen match, and the reason why I don't like it, is because um, it locks you out of your own extra deck. Like a majority of your extra deck is not Earth type. Majority of your powerful cards are like Dark and like Light types and stuff like that. For example, Zeus and Access Code. Those are the cards that you want to be able to access in order to push for damage. Because if you're just sitting on your Earth types, then you're not going to be winning the game at all. Like you're sitting on Sarah and like stuff like this. Not too good. So I don't like Goizen for that particular reason. Like you might be able to lock your opponent out of the game, I guess, potentially, but you're also kind of like just stalling for time. You're also locking yourself out, and you have no way of closing out the game if you play Goizen. So it's a maybe. It's a maybe. Another card to consider is Solemn Strike. Solemn Strike, you can definitely main deck this thing. It's that good. It's good enough to main deck for sure. The only thing I don't like about Solemn Strike is it doesn't proc any of your cards really. It's a counter trap, so it doesn't proc half of your effects. And I like picking one or the other. I like either playing Solemn Judgment or Solemn Strike. I don't see a deck where I can play both and be okay with that, unless it's like counter fairies or something like that. Yeah, for me, if I'm playing Solemn Strike, it's gonna be main deck Solemn Strike, game like 1 obviously, and then game 2 I would just side out all Solemn Strikes and put in Solemn Judgments if I'm going first. So if not, then you can keep the Solemn Strikes in. So that's how I would play it if I were to main deck Solemn Strikes. The good thing about Solemn Strikes, it does get rid of problematic cards on your opponent's board. So if they activate an ability, you can just negate and destroy it. But it does have the weakness of, spending 1,500 life points. While this deck doesn't really cost too much life points to use, it is something to consider when going into time and whatnot. And I guess it's the same issues with Solemn Warning, but the fact that Solemn Warning is more flexible, like you can always activate it no matter what. But yeah, there is a bigger cost when using Solemn Warning than there is using Solemn Strike. But pros and cons. All right. So for the extra deck, let's just talk about it quickly, hopefully, and then maybe I'll make a separate video showcasing some combos and stuff like that, some basic line of gameplay, and then another time. All right, so some options for your extra deck. Basically, you have the entire XC rank 4s to go into, so yeah, you're limited by your imagination at that point. But some other good cards would be like Tornado Dragon if you need something to pop with. I prefer Tornado Dragon over something like Nightmare Phoenix, just because one requires a cost, and this one you can pop 2 things versus 1. So yeah, pretty self-explanatory there. Rebellion package is similar to the Utopia package, I guess, in its use case. I think Utopia is better, but I did see some OCG lists with the Rebellion package. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with the Rebellion package. If you know what you're supposed to do with this, let me know, because I've been trying to see why they picked Rebellion over Utopia, and I just don't know. So yeah. Gallant Granite. This guy, his only singular purpose in the deck is to search for the Heavenly Lord Prison guy, because he is rock type, so he searches for this guy. So if you main deck Heavenly Prison, then you might want to consider playing 1 copy of this in your extra deck. If you're not, then I don't think he's even worth taking a look at. Malevolent Sin, I've seen some decks with this. The only purpose I can see with this card is just to run over something, and the fact that it works under Champa because it is an insect, so you can go into this card and just run over something is my intention, or the way I see this card being used. You can pump it and make it a level 7, but I don't think you can summon Overlord Dragon on top of this thing. I could be wrong, totally. I've seen these 3 played together, and I'm just not too sure. I read the cards, but I'm not 100% sure how the hell you're supposed to work with them, or what sort of combo is going on in there, or what trickery is going on in there. But yeah, if you have an idea, just let me know. All right, and now we're gonna talk about something a little interesting that might be good in the deck. So this card just came off the ban list. Potato Myas here, Mr. Potato. So this card is pretty good. Obviously for multiple reasons. It allows you to go into two of the strongest Exceed monsters that you can probably find. And especially in today's meta, it allows you to go into good old Constellar Diamond over here, or you can go into Infinity. With Diamond, I think you can either wait for main phase 2, if you somehow go into main phase 2, you can summon him, or you just use his effect. The problem with him is that if you're gonna use Telemiles here, you need to be able to get three materials to be able to like use it on your turn. Because if you attach a material during your opponent's turn and it uses ability, it's kind of pointless because you can't bring out the other good card, which is Nova here, or not Nova, Affinity. So if the deck from when I did play test it, you're able to majority of the time do bring out 3 materials. So most of the time I'll have something like a Brigadine on board, and maybe a Hotelia, and maybe a Traptrix monster plus Sarah. So you can use 3 of these cards, and then go into the Telemiles, the Telemiles, and then you can immediately go into Nova and then into Infinity. So that will give Infinity 2 materials to work with. So you could do that. The only issue with that is that that requires 3 extra deck space, maybe 4, because this is the package you would be playing. And I don't know if I can justify spending 4 spaces just for that particular play, even though I think it is a strong play. The other option is maybe you bring out 2 different Exceed rank 4s. You bring out like a Rafflesia, and maybe you bring out a Time Thief Redoer. But Telemiles and like Infinity is pretty like strong too. I just don't know if it's worth it. I mean, I guess you could technically just not play Diamond and just play this into the Infinity, but it's not like a combo you always go off into. And you don't always get the 3 material, but I don't know. I'll have to test play it a little bit more and see where that goes. But yeah, to make Telemiles here usable, you do need that 3 material, because I don't think this card would survive 1 turn. Like, you could make him on 2 material and then attach a material during your opponent's turn, and then be able to summon out Nova and then summon out Infinity on top of Nova. But that's like a huge maybe. So I don't know. But that is an idea there. All right, and then last off here, a couple more cards. We have this guy here. I'm not gonna even try to pronounce his name, but it's Ben. I'm gonna call him Ben. This card is pretty good. It's really good, except it's hard to make. Even in this deck, we don't have enough plant monsters to be able to make this guy comfortably. I don't think, or at least consistently. If we can make it consistently, I would definitely play him. But he's a little bit more of on a sort of a maybe side. It's like it is playable, it is doable, but it requires a lot of working around in order to get him out. But if you do get him out, then you can just like slap, you can start just interrupting your opponent, and then if they kill him, you can bring him back. So there's stuff like that, cute stuff you can do with him, but I don't think there's a consistent way to bring him out. Because if you take a look at the deck here, from here we're playing about like 6 different plants here, and then like I guess you have Sarah and Trulia here as plant type, and Rafflesia. So it's because the fact that it requires two plants and it's link 4. It's a little difficult to bring out in my opinion. So didn't quite make the cut there. Then you have the aroma mages, the jasmine here. So jasmine's interesting. It requires two plants, so that is doable in the deck. You can get two plants easily. The problem is like it also requires a monster that you need to sack in order to summon another plant from the deck. But the plants that we would summon from the deck aren't that great to begin with. So like they don't have any good effects. Like you summon out Dianea, I guess. You can summon out this card, I guess. You can summon this. I guess it's okay. You can just banish something, or I guess the Vesculio here. But yeah, I don't think it's really worth running because I'm not sure what it would do for you outside of just being able to banish a monster and maybe combo off some more. Maybe if you play this, and I guess you can technically go into the Ben guy here, but that requires a lot of like maneuvering, which I don't think is really worth it. So yeah. Last off here, you just got the generic Unicorn, Phoenix, and IP Masquerena. If you wanted to go into that, go IP, go into Unicorn, and then ditch a card. I feel like that's an okay play. I don't think it's really worth the extra deck space to just fit these in. I'd rather play the Affinity package and Telmeos package here. But yeah, so those are some options for you to look at to build out the extra deck. If I had to play the Telmeos package, I'd probably just end up cutting like the Utopia. I'd probably cut Azusa here. So that's three cuts I can definitely make for sure. I don't know if it would make any other cuts than that because I think everything else is pretty good. You can maybe cut out the Babushka if you wanted to. But I think I'd rather just keep the extra deck the way it is right now. Give myself some power and just close out the game. Even though I think Infinity is a pretty awesome card and it's cool that you can make it in the deck. But it just requires a lot of extra deck space, and we really don't have that much extra deck space here. But yeah, so let me know what you guys think. This deck is definitely still a work in progress. There's still a bunch of cards to take a look at, try out, and the deck doesn't come out for like at least another month, so we got plenty of time to kind of mull over again before you decide to buy into cards. But in general, I think the deck can be built for really cheap once it does come out. Nothing too expensive. Mainly the most expensive card is probably going to be Access Code, I think. And I think Access Code is definitely a card that you probably should be playing in the deck just because yeah, it allows you to close out the game for sure. If not, you can maybe play more, rank 4s and just spam that out. So that's also another option. Extra deck, or sorry, side deck is still a work in progress. I wouldn't copy my extra deck for sure, or sorry, my side deck for sure. Only card I think that's like is a staple is gonna be the judgments here. Everything else is kind of like to your tasting. Definitely still recommend some sort of back row hate though for sure. Mamelo for the most part can do that job. She can pop a bunch of cards, but in the event that you don't see Mamelo, you might want to get these guys out. So or add these guys in, I should say. In terms of boss monsters, Lady Labyrinth is gonna be a funny card to play. I love the art for the Labyrinth cards. They're very cool, very very like just cool cards, and the archetype would be better, and maybe I can build a deck based off Labyrinths, but for now I want to stick with the Traptrix stuff for sure. Yeah, and I think that's really it. That's all I really got to talk about here. Maybe in another video I'll make a combo video because I think this particular video is really long enough. I'll make some basic plays and stuff like that, and kind of test the ratio of the cards a little bit more and stuff like that. But yeah, this is kind of like just a place where you can kind of jump off of and then dive into the deck and then come up hopefully with some cool ideas and go from there. Anyways, I'm starting to lose my voice, so I'll see you guys next time.